So do you consider yourself a Swiftie then?
A little bit. Yeah.
I love it.
Yeah.
Amazing.
Everything she writes is unique. And I was talking to my friends about this the other day.
Yeah.
Her music is incredible. And even if you don't like it, it's very hard to find any fault with any of her pieces.
That's
So there's
very
something
true.
that speaks to everybody. My name is Jeremy Crosmer, and I play the cello.
Very nice. So how did you get started playing the cello?
So I started when I was 4. My
Okay.
parents took me to a concert in Seattle of the Seattle Symphony, and there was a cello soloist performing the Shostakovich Cello Concerto. And so I heard that, and I told my parents I wanted to play the cello.
Okay.
So a couple weeks later, my mom brings home a cello. It's a quarter size, so it's very small, almost as small as a viola.
Okay.
And she pulls it out and she tries to put it under her neck, and it didn't fit. And so I told her,
Right.
no, that's not how you do it. So I grabbed it from her and I showed her the right way to play it. And
Right.
I've been playing ever since.
Wow. Oh my gosh. Yeah, there's something to, like, my story is very similar, seeing a harp on stage, and it's just that moment of hearing the music, watching the instrument, and seeing the expressions of the performer live, that, like, it's kind of one that sticks in your brain a little bit, doesn't it?
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's really important to be playing for kids. So every time we have a children's concert, I'm thinking about which kid in the audience is going to say, I want to learn that instrument.
Right, go home to their parents and just talk about it until it can happen. Yeah, that's incredible. So you grew up in Seattle then.
I spent
Yeah.
a couple years in Spokane. We kind of moved all over because I'm from a military family.
Okay.
So I spent most of my time growing up in Arkansas, but
Okay.
I learned to speak up in Washington State, so that's why I don't have the accent.
I see. Yeah. Do you get, I mean, you talked about how your mom like tried to play the cello like this, right? And I always think it's fascinating, like, we're so involved in the music world now, but I think there's a lot of people that still don't know that culture or are super involved in it. Do you ever get any like weird comments about the cello that have stuck out in your brain?
Well, the most common comment that I get is, oh, cello sounds like the human voice. And I
Really?
completely agree with that one. And then
Wow.
the second comment that I always get is that it's their favorite instrument.
Okay.
And I always respond, me too.
Oh, I mean, I'm glad it's your favorite instrument. if
I
it's
could
the
see
one you're
harp
playing.
being some people's favorite too.
Yeah, it does end up being some people's
Yeah.
favorite, definitely. Why do you think that is? That people think it sounds like the human voice? Is it like the resonance or?
Yeah, there's a lot of versatility to the instrument. So
Okay.
it has a very wide range, and it goes through the range of every vocal range. So there's the deep baritone,
Okay.
and there's the higher tenor sound, which happens a lot in this concerto.
Okay.
And then it can go even higher, like contralto and alto and soprano ranges, and it still sounds beautiful in all of those ranges.
Right. Okay. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense that the range would be part of the reasons. I feel like, especially cello, when you hear it solo, like it really, it is so resonant, and it really, like a lot of the melodies that you hear are something, like you're saying, you can go home and you can sing them and they kind of get stuck in your head and everything like that. So
Yeah.
I find that to be one of the most favorite things I have about that instrument too. So how did you hear about this equal billing project?
So I'm good friends with Matt Albin, and he's been talking with me about this project for a couple years.
Okay.
And when I knew about what he was doing with Fernande Decruck's music, and when he told me there was a cello concerto, I immediately sparked that this would be such an exciting project to do. And I was not disappointed by the piece. It's such a beautiful piece. There's so many unique colors in the work, including a bunch of instrumental orchestral sections without the cello that just kind of explode out of nowhere and take you on all of these adventures, and then you come back and get more of the lyrical cello lullabies. But it's such a beautiful piece,
Okay.
and I'm happy to be playing it.
Good. So to that effect, like, how would you describe like the style of music?
So she's a French composer, and the piece was written in 1932. So there's a lot of elements of the French classicists from that period. So
Okay.
you can think about Debussy and Ravel, who were writing during that time. Debussy had died by 1918. So there's elements of that. But then also she takes things in a unique direction. So she incorporates a lot of different styles. Her husband was a saxophone player.
Okay.
And so there's, it's almost like some jazzy sections. And there's a part in the third movement, which Matt likes to draw attention to, sounds like the theme from Star Wars.
Really?
Yeah.
Oh my goodness. Okay.
It's the Imperial March.
Okay.
And we also figured out that I think John Williams might have been born by the time of the piece was written, or he may not.
Oh, interesting.
He certainly didn't know about it because the piece has been lost for so long.
I see. Are there any, so the piece has been lost for a while. Is there any tracking or is there any information showing that this piece has been performed before, or is this kind of the first time?
So as far as we know, it's never been played.
Really?
There's no record of that. If you look at the score, there are a few notes. So it's possible that the piece was workshopped in New York where it was written.
Okay.
So maybe an orchestra had played it just so that Fernande Decruck could hear how it sounded and make some changes, but we don't know for sure if there was ever a performance.
Okay, so when you're preparing to record something like this, you're not really sure if it was performed or not. There's no recordings you can reference. What does that preparation look like?
Yeah, so it's a little bit intimidating because sometimes we have to make executive decisions about how to interpret something because there's no definitive recording.
Okay.
You could consider Matt Albin the definitive scholar on Fernande Decruck at this point. And so whenever I had a question about the concerto, I would ask him, hey, what do you think she meant by this passage? And then it's just him and me trying to figure things out.
Wow, so you really got to have kind of a hand in some deep artistic decisions then. I mean, other than just what you would play or decide playing any piece, you got to were there any changes that had to be made? Yeah,
we had to make a few changes just to make the piece fit with the instrument a little bit better. But for the most part, we stuck to what she wrote as much as we can.
Yeah.
It's really exciting because many people will play premieres of cello concertos by composers who are alive today.
Okay.
But this is a unique experience to be able to play the premiere of a piece that was written over 90 years ago, or almost exactly 90 years ago, and was never played.
Right. Yeah, that's so fascinating. So you mentioned that Matt's kind of the foremost scholar for this project. Is researching the composer a big part of how you prepare for this recording project then?
Yes, absolutely.
Okay.
So I know a lot of her music at this point, but all because of Matt and the recordings that he's made.
Okay.
And I love every piece that she's written. I think each piece has its own unique style, which is a very difficult thing to do as a composer. And I would know because I write music.
Right, that's true.
Yeah, so she just has something unique to say in every piece. And so as he's digging through these scores and manuscripts of pieces that have never been performed or pieces that were performed and then lost, and finding all of this new music, and it encapsulates a variety of styles, it's really special to see what's going to come next.
Right, yeah, absolutely. I think so too. And so if I could, for just a minute, read kind of the vision for this project and get your ideas on it. So the Equal Billing Project aims to record and support the music of a deceased composer that wasn't equally billed during their lifetime. I wonder if you could speak on that. Like, why is the Equal Billing Project so important? Like, what are some reasons that a composer might be marginalized?
Yeah, that's a great question. So I think what's great is that there are a lot of programs out there today that are supporting women and people of color, but most of those programs are for people who are currently living. And so we still have the past 300 years, from the 1600s through the 1900s, where women composers, for instance, have been marginalized, like you said. And so to discover a composer whose music should have been performed during her time, but for whatever reason was put on the back burner, and to bring that to life, we can now go back to music from the 20th century and bring a new light to it, because now we have music by another woman composer.
Right, yeah, and that kind of speaks to our vision too, actually. So all of these recordings, the sheet music, all the biographical information that we're collecting with the Equal Billing Project is something that we're using to facilitate diverse representation in orchestral performances and music education. So with music education especially, I wonder if you can talk about maybe some of your music theory classes that you might have had to go through. Like, what did that look like? Were you seeing diverse composers in there, or was it kind of, what was your experience?
Yeah, so I was in music theory a long time ago.
Okay.
But I can speak to teaching cello and how we might incorporate this into our lesson plans.
I see.
So for cellists, we typically go through the same set of concertos with each student that we work with.
Okay.
And those tend to be the Haydn concertos, Elgar, Dvorak, Schumann, and just over and over, people are learning these pieces.
Yes.
But to have a piece like Decruck that we can add in there at some point and say, now you need to learn this skill, like working in thumb position or playing high notes, for instance.
Okay.
This piece would be a great piece to learn. And then not only do they get to learn that technique, but they can go back and research about the composer and learn about her life and how interesting she is, and maybe that would inspire them to listen to all of her other music and find a new love for a composer.
Right, we can only hope, right? Like that just having this information available can speak to one person or another. I know when I talk to Matt, he talks about concert programming too. If he's choosing music that's all of a particular era and it's all kind of mostly in the past, like some of these like 19th century music or something like that. He always wants to add in like a composer of color, a female, somebody that we can draw attention to that wasn't given their proper notice or recognition in their time. But he talks about like there's really not that many options or so this project is really, the hope is to kind of diversify those programs. I wonder what you think about that part of it too. Like do you think that this project could help concert programming in the future?
Oh, absolutely. And one of the most special things about this project is the exposure that we're creating. So by creating this recording, we're allowing anyone access to listen to this music, and they'll be able to access the score and the parts. There will be a cello and piano reduction of the piece. So if someone wants to learn it for their private lessons, they'll be able to do that.
Right.
So there's so many opportunities for people to discover her music and pursue it further. And the other great thing about it is that first and foremost, Fernande Decruck's music is amazing. So it's not just that we're playing music by a woman composer.
Right.
We're playing great music.
Yeah.
And I have a feeling all of the future composers that we highlight in this project are also going to have great music. That's going to be a requirement.
Yeah, I'm sure it will be. Yeah, I got to listen a little bit while you were playing earlier, and I have to say this piece sounds very cinematic to me. Would you say that too?
Yeah, I completely agree.
Yeah.
Not just the Star Wars part, but
right.
Everything about it tells a story. So the first movement just takes you on this dark journey, and there's, like I said, moments where the orchestra takes over and just goes off on its own and wanders around. And then we come back with sort of almost Don Giovanni-like ending to the first movement.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Wow.
And then the second movement is much more placid and serene. It's like being in a pasture with, shepherds and sheep and all
Oh,
that.
wow.
And there's a version of it for cello and organ. And so you'll hear these passages that are very sustained. If you think about an organ sound, the chords are sustained in the pipes, and they alternate back and forth. So just this sort of flowing back and forth. And then once again, the orchestra takes over and goes on some magical journey without the cellist. So I'll just be sitting there for a couple minutes experiencing this wild ride. And then it goes back to that peaceful scenery.
Wow.
And then the third movement is very bombastic. You've got your Imperial March motif. And then a fugue, which is pretty rare. What I've noticed is that some composers will use fugues in their music and only briefly, and then they'll realize that maybe it's not a technique that works that well. So a fugue is where every instrument gets the melody at different points. And so they're all featured. You'll start with flute and then clarinet and oboe and just go down the line. And eventually every instrument will get to play the theme. The tricky thing about that is for the audience to listen to that, their brain just almost goes haywire for a little bit because you're trying to keep track of everything.
Yeah, trying to follow it as it moves. That's true.
Yeah, but Decruck is not afraid to try these things.
Okay.
And in our case, I think it works really well. I think she wraps it up in a neat little box. So afterwards, you can feel like you experienced something, but in the end, you made it back to reality.
Yeah. Wow, that's beautiful. I love the way you talk about it. It's so visual, the way that you're explaining the whole thing. And I mean, I guess that's why we were calling it cinematic. It feels like the music's kind of taking you on this gorgeous journey.
Right.
So when you're playing with our symphony, what has the experience been like kind of collaborating with Jackson?
Yeah, it's been great. So I love the Jackson Symphony.
Me too, but I know I work here, so
yeah, you can pay me later.
Yeah.
So I've been working with them for many years, since 2018, but always as a composer.
Yeah.
And Matt has commissioned me to write 3 pieces for the symphony.
Okay.
And I have so many friends that play in the orchestra, so it's really special every time that I make the trip out here to hear the orchestra play. But this is my first time playing cello in front of the orchestra.
Really? So yeah, we've only had your compositions being performed before. You're so right. This is the first time you're playing with us.
Yeah, and it's just wonderful to actually get to be up on stage with everyone. And I can turn around. My back is to everybody, of course, but I can turn around and just see all of my friends and people that I love working with.
Right.
So it's really a pleasure.
Oh, that's so nice. I'm glad. Yeah. I'm glad. We're hoping to have a great experience with this and carry it on for many years to come. Like, we're really hoping this will be a long-standing project for us. Have you been a part of any projects like this before? Like, have you seen anything about recording the music of deceased composers? I think we touched on it a little bit, but...
Yeah. I haven't been a part of any recording projects for this.
Okay.
But there is a composer that has recently come to mind with a similar story to Fernande Decruck, whose name is Dora Pejakovic.
And I haven't heard her before.
Yeah, I'm not going to remember all of the details or how to pronounce her name. But I recently discovered her music. I think she's from Croatia.
Oh,
and,
wow.
We played her second symphony in Detroit Symphony this past February. And then I was able to play her piano trio. And there's something special about discovering new music from that period by a composer that you didn't know, because they will throw you for surprises.
Yeah.
It's not your typical Mendelssohn or Beethoven. There's just something that is a little bit different, and it's always special to hear.
Right. Oh, that's so nice to hear. Yeah. I mean, there is something to be said about, we have these I'm going to call them canon composers, you know, the ones that we follow and we have like historically tracked what their music sounds like and at which point in time did they change their sound. But exactly what you're saying, when you uncover someone new, you don't know what to expect, and yeah, you get some surprises along the way. That's really kind of cool.
Yeah, and I think we don't always realize how influenced our ears are by these mainstream composers. Like Haydn was the father of the string quartet and also the father of the symphony in a lot of ways. He wrote 104 symphonies.
Wow.
And so every composer after him was, in a way, in his shadow or using his symphonies as building blocks and his quartets as building blocks to write new pieces. And so you have this whole lineage of composers all developing out of the same gene as it is.
Yeah.
And so to experience one who branches out and tries something unique, you could think of it as like a mutation almost, in a positive way.
Right,
you know,
like they're taking influences from so many different areas.
Yeah, and a lot of my favorite composers do exactly that. So, for instance, Debussy took a lot of his influence from the Javanese gamelan orchestra.
Yeah.
So there's that East Asian influence. Yeah, so it's always interesting to hear these new composers trying new things.
Yeah, so would you say, is Debussy your favorite composer then? Do you have a favorite?
He's definitely up there.
Okay.
I used to say Samuel Barber, but I think a lot of the French composers really speak to me, which is so Debussy and Ravel especially, and now of course Decruck.
Right, yeah. Okay, so is there anything that I haven't asked you about yet that you're like, you really want to tell me either about this project or about yourself?
I don't know.
You don't know? I know it's
question.
so open-ended, but
yeah. I mean, I think women composers in particularly have a lot of power, especially today. I think one of the most influential musicians of our time is Taylor Swift, of course, who is writing great music.
It's true.
And everything she writes is unique. And I was talking to my friends about this the other day.
Yeah.
Her music is incredible, and even if you don't like it, it's very hard to find any fault with any of her pieces.
That's
so
very
there's something
true.
that speaks to everybody. So I think it's the time for women to be shining right now.
I like the sound of that. So do you consider yourself a Swiftie then?
A little bit. Yeah.
I love it.
Yeah.
Amazing. Yeah, I think that's the only qualification, right? Like if you feel like you're a Swiftie, then I think you are.
I love
Absolutely.
her music.
Good. Okay, so one last thing. If you were gonna give me like an elevator pitch or something to draw me in to listen to this album, what would it be?
Oh, like one sentence?
Just something short.
Okay.
It doesn't have to be one sentence exactly.
Yeah.
But...
Come hear great cinematic French music from the 20th century.
Yeah. That's good.
Yeah.
That's perfect. I'm there. I love music, so I'm sure I'll be listening to it, of course. And I'm excited to hear you record it on our album.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. I appreciate this, and I'm so excited for your work with our project.
Thank you so much. It was a
Thank you.
pleasure talking with you.
Oh, thank you.